Ukraine targets several Russian air bases in large-scale Operation Spiderweb. Ukraine has carried out large-scale drone strikes against several air bases deep inside Russia, destroying multiple combat planes, according to the Ukrainian Security Service, SBU. The operation, dubbed Spiderweb, comes on the eve of expected peace talks in Istanbul between Russia and Ukraine, and involved the most ambitious simultaneous strikes on Russian air bases carried out by Ukraine since the war began. An SBU source says that Russian bombers were burning en masse at 4 air bases hundreds of miles apart, adding that drones had been launched from trucks inside Russia. Ukraine plans the operation for more than a year and a half and uses 117 drones to carry out the attacks, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in an address on Sunday night. The planning, organization, and all the details were perfectly prepared. It can be confidently said that this was an absolutely unique operation, Zelensky said. The Trump administration was not given a heads up about the operation, an official administration told CNN. A senior U.S. defense official told CNN that Ukraine's attack showed a level of sophistication that they had not seen before. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth received regular updates as he traveled to Joint Base Andrews on Sunday, but has not yet spoken to his Ukrainian counterparts, the official said. The Department of Defense is continuing to assess the extent of the damage from the attacks and determine the details of the operation, the official added. More than 40 aircraft were known to have been hit, according to the SBU source, including Tu-95 and Tu-22M3 strategic bombers, and one of Russia's few remaining A-50 surveillance planes. According to the SBU, the operation caused an estimated $7 billion in damages and hit 34% of Russia's strategic cruise missile carriers at its main air bases. We are doing everything to drive the enemy from our native land. We will strike them at sea, in the air, and on land. And if needed, we'll reach them even from underground, the SBU said in a statement. The targeted airfields included Belaya in Irkutsk, some 4,500 kilometers, 2,800 miles, from Ukraine's border with Russia, and the Dyagilevo base in Ryazan in western Russia, about 520 kilometers, 320 miles, from Ukraine, which is a training center for Russia's strategic bomber force. The Olenia base near Murmansk in the Arctic Circle, more than 2,000 kilometers, 1,200 miles, from Ukraine, was also struck, according to the source, as well as the Ivanovo Air Base, more than 800 kilometers, 500 miles from Ukraine. Ivanovo is a base for Russian military transport aircraft. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed Ukraine had targeted Russian airfields across 5 regions on Sunday, calling the drone strikes terrorist attacks. The ministry said strikes were repelled in the Ivanovo, Ryazan, and Amur regions, but that several pieces of aircraft caught fire after attacks in the Murmansk and Irkutsk regions. It added that the fires have since been extinguished. There were no casualties as a result of the attacks, the exercise continued, adding that some participants in the terrorist attacks have been detained. The governor of Irkutsk region, Igor Kobzyev, said that drones had been launched from a truck near the Belaya base. Kobzyev said on Telegram that the exact number of drones deployed had not been determined. Emergency and security services were at the site, he added. SBU drones were targeting aircraft that bomb Ukrainian cities every night, the SBU source said. One video supplied by the source purportedly shows the Belaya airfield in flames and the voice of the head of the SBU, Lieutenant Vasyl Malyuk, commenting on the situation. How beautiful Belaya airfield looks now. Enemy's strategic aircraft, he says. CNN was able to confirm the location of that video, as well as 2 others posted on social media showing smoke rising from the Belaya airbase. It was not immediately able to independently verify other videos provided by the SBU. The SBU source said that the operation was extremely complicated from a logistical point of view, with the drones carried inside wooden mobile homes that had been carried into Russia on trucks. The drones were hidden under the roofs of the houses, which were already placed on trucks. At the right moment, the roofs were remotely opened, and the drones flew to hit Russian bombers. One video purportedly of one attack appears to show drones rising from a truck as vehicles pass on a nearby highway. Another image shows the roof of the truck on the ground. The source added that people involved were already back in Ukraine. Ukraine's operation followed a Russian attack overnight Saturday that involved 472 drones, Moscow's largest drone attack since the war began. It came the same day as a Russian missile strike on a training site used by Ukrainian forces, killing at least 12 people and wounding more than 60 others. It also came soon after two bridges collapsed in Russia's western regions bordering Ukraine in unclear circumstances. This chain of events comes as Russia and Ukraine are set to return to peace negotiations on Monday. The talks, which will take place in Istanbul, have been strained by uncertainty. U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed frustration around Russian President Vladimir Putin's resistance to advance the peace talks. Putin proposed holding direct talks in Turkey earlier this month, but never showed up, despite Zelensky agreeing to meet. In the end, the two nations sent low-level delegations to negotiate instead. A framework from the Ukrainian delegation lists key principles for the talks that include a full and unconditional ceasefire, an exchange of prisoners, and the release of hostages and return of abducted children. Russia and Ukraine may meet again for peace talks, but neither side gives reason for optimism. Since last sitting down with Ukraine to talk peace, Russia has launched 4 of its 5 largest drone attacks against the country, killed more than 340 of its civilians, and continued to peddle its false narrative about the unprovoked war it has been waging for more than a decade. Now Moscow wants to talk. Again. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the next round of talks between Russia and Ukraine will take place in Turkey on Monday. On Sunday, Kyiv confirmed that it will be sending a delegation to the meeting, as Russian state media reported that a Russian delegation was flying to Istanbul for the talks. Ukraine also announced on the same day the most ambitious simultaneous strikes on Russian airbases carried out by its forces since the war began, adding an extra layer of uncertainty to the already fragile talks in Turkey. Kyiv says that Russia and Ukraine agreed to exchange their requirements for a ceasefire during their previous meeting in Istanbul last month. But while Kyiv said it presented its plan last week, Russia did not. The Kremlin has so far ignored the call by Ukraine to present the plan. In a post on Telegram on Wednesday, Lavrov said the Russian delegation would present its memorandum to Ukraine at the meeting on June 2nd. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the Kremlin's failure to hand over its plan was another Russian deception, and accused Moscow of not wanting to end the war. For a meeting to be meaningful, its agenda must be clear, and the negotiations must be properly prepared, Zelensky wrote on X on Friday after hosting Turkey's foreign minister for talks in Kyiv. Zelensky said he'd also discussed the potential second round of peace talks with Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Friday, writing on Telegram. We discussed a possible next meeting in Istanbul and under what conditions Ukraine is ready to take part in it. We share the view that this meeting cannot, and should not be empty. In a post on X on Sunday, the Ukrainian leader said that he had requested preparation of the Istanbul meeting at the highest level in order to establish a reliable and lasting peace and ensure security. Zelensky added that Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov will lead the delegation again. But even though Russian and Ukrainian officials have agreed to meet on Monday, their summit is unlikely to yield any immediate results. Statements made by Russian officials in recent days make it clear that Moscow is sticking to its maximalist demands. Speaking after a phone call with U.S. President Donald Trump on May 19th, Russian President Vladimir Putin reiterated his demand that the root causes of the conflict must be eliminated. The root causes include long-held Russian grievances that include the existence of Ukraine as a sovereign state and NATO's eastward expansion since the end of the Cold War. Kyiv has dismissed these demands, as accepting them would effectively amount to capitulation. The talks on Monday may be designed mostly to appease Trump, who has repeatedly told both Ukraine and Russia that there will be consequences if they don't engage in his peace process. Trump has been pressing Kyiv to talk to Moscow, threatening to walk away from the talks and cut U.S. aid if he concludes that Ukraine isn't cooperating. And while he has threatened massive sanctions against Russia if it doesn't agree with his 30-day ceasefire proposal, He has also voiced concerns that potential new sanctions on Russia could jeopardize a deal. On Friday, a bipartisan pair of U.S. senators met with Zelensky in Kyiv. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut is co-sponsoring a bill to impose more sanctions on Russia, including a 500% tariff on goods imported from countries that buy Russian oil, gas, uranium, and other products. It must pass both chambers of Congress and be approved by Trump to become law. Asked by reporters on Friday if he would support the bill, Trump responded, "I don't know, I'll have to see it. I'll take a look at it." Putin has not explicitly rejected the ceasefire proposals, choosing instead to delay and distract. Russia insists on having the talks and presenting its ceasefire proposal only once the two sides meet is just the latest example of this tactic. Putin initially proposed the first round of the talks in response to the ceasefire or sanctions ultimatum given to Moscow by Ukraine's European allies. The Russian president ignores the ultimatum, prejudice instead direct talks between Moscow and Kyiv. This prompted Trump, who initially backed the ultimatum, to change his tune and call on Zelensky to take the meeting. Moscow's conduct since the talks last month suggests no desire to end the war with a ceasefire. Russian forces have accelerated airborne attacks against Ukraine in recent weeks, are stepping up ground attacks in many areas along the front line, and Moscow is building up its forces elsewhere. At the same time, Putin ordered one of the largest expansions of the Russian military in recent years. Meanwhile, over the weekend, Ukraine carried out its most ambitious strikes on Russian air bases since the war began, using drones to destroy multiple Russian combat planes on Sunday, according to a source in the Ukrainian Security Service, SBU. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed Ukraine had targeted Russian airfields across 5 regions, calling the drone strikes terrorist attacks. The day before, 2 bridges in western regions of Russia collapsed, killing at least 7 people and injuring dozens. It was not clear on Sunday morning whether the 2 incidents, which both involved trains, in neighboring Bryansk and Kursk, were related, or what exactly caused the separate collapses. Investigators from Russia's investigative committee were working at the scenes to establish the circumstances of what happened. Expectations were running high ahead of the talks last month, the first direct meeting between Ukraine and Russia since the early days of the full-scale war. This was mostly because of speculation that Putin himself might show up, after being challenged to travel to Turkey by Zelensky. When the Russian leader sent a low-level delegation in his place, it became clear no breakthrough was in sight. Although the two sides agreed to hold the largest ever prisoner exchange during the meeting, there was no sign of a ceasefire agreement being any closer. As for the latest meeting, while it's obvious that neither Moscow nor Kyiv are particularly keen on talking to each actual other and have little expectation of progress, they are likely to play along just to keep Trump interested.